Hello, my name's Fiona. Thank you for joining me today for this Christmas craft activity, brought to you in collaboration with Rugby Museum and Art Gallery. I'm just going to switch screens now so you can see a bit more clearly the materials we're going to be using, and so you can see a bit more clearly the process. So I'll just switch over. There we go. So today we're going to be making a series of Christmas cards. First of all, I'm going to be showing you how to use silk paints. So for some of you, this might be an introduction into silk paints. For others of you, you might have experience with silk painting, but just looking at some different ways of applying the techniques and skills that you know. With then, sort of the second half of the activity, we're going to look at presenting our work and using aperture cards, and I'm just going to give you some ideas about how to really make those look really smart for kind of a professional finish. Okay, so in front of me, you can see the materials I've got ready for today. I'll just put those to one side now, we'll come back to those later. So I've got my silk paints. Now we're using heat set dyes for this activity, and there's different brands available. Most commonly, we've got the Pebeo Set Silk, and then we've got these slightly newer inks on the market by Dynaflow. They're by Jacquard, called Dynaflow. You can intermix the two. They're kind of basically the same thing. These come in a really good starter pack actually for a whole range of colours, so that's a really good way to get started. I'll just move those to one side. Today, I'm only going to be using the primary colours. You'll see that we can mix pretty much all of the colours from these three colours. So again, you don't have to invest a lot to get started with this silk painting craft. Okay, I'll put those to one side now, because I've put the colours that I need in my palette already. Right, the next thing we need is gutta. Now the technique we're going to be using is called serti, and serti is when you outline so that you create a barrier, which you then drop the ink inside of, and this gutta prevents the ink from spreading. That's how we contain the ink into the areas that we want. Again, there's different brands that you can buy. I've got some here by Marabou, and I've got some here by DuPont. Okay, and again, this one in here, which I've decanted from a larger bottle, this one is also DuPont. You can also, Pebeo also do them in little squeezy tubes that are very easy to use. I've just got a variety because different companies do different colours. I just wanted to have a good range to play with. Okay. So I'll just put those to one side as well, and then we'll just talk about the next step in getting ready. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to get our surface ready that we're going to be painting on. Now, obviously we're painting on silk. The silk I tend to use for card making is this heavier silk. It's still habitite silk, but this is called a habitite 8. And this is a heavier weave silk. It's what I use for my winter silk scarf designs, because it really is a surprisingly warm material to wear. The lighter pongee silk is a little bit more fiddly to work with when you're making smaller things like cards. So I would recommend a heavier silk like this called the Habitite 8. All of these materials are readily available. I use some independent companies, two really, really good ones. It's called Rainbow Silks and Silk Craft. And I know on Rainbow Silks, everything I'm using today, from the freezer paper I'm about to show you, to the silk, to the paints, everything, and the aperture cards you can buy on their one website. So to get started, I have ironed my silk onto this backing paper, Reynolds freezer paper. You can buy this, I've seen it in Dunelm. Again, you know, silk craft places like that, they do sell it. I think even Dunelm, Hobbycraft have had it in stock as well. So this works by ironing your silk onto the paper, and you'll see there's two sides to the paper. You've got a shiny side and a matte side, and the shiny side has this kind of plasticky coating on it. And when you iron the silk onto it, it adheres to it, so you have this surface to work on, which makes it much easier to work with. Some of you may have done silk craft before, where you mount your silk onto a frame and stretch it, which is great for larger pieces, but this is much easier when we're doing smaller pieces like this. Okay, so the way I do this is I put my silk down on my ironing board, often with like a cotton sheet underneath it, just so it doesn't pick up any staining or anything from the ironing board. I then take the shiny side of my Reynolds paper, freezer paper, and I put that down onto the silk. I can then iron onto the backing here. Okay, so just use a silk setting heat. You don't want to go too hot. And then you can just see by turning it over whether it's fully adhered or not. You may find you get a little bit of wrinkling and bubbling on this side. So what you can do is put your cotton sheet or your pillowcase over the top side, then flip it over and then iron on this side as well. Okay, so just be patient, medium heat iron, and you will get a lovely smooth finish like that. One of the other advantages of putting it onto the backing paper is it's then very easy to cut out. So here we go, here are quite a few pieces I've got ready to go. So what's next? We've got our silk ready, we need a design. Now for today, I'm going to use just a very simple bauble design, but of course the great thing with this is once I've got the circles drawn down, I can adapt and change the design for each card, so each person I'm sending a card to can get their own sort of individual design. I will quite often just draw out my own design because I love drawing and designing, but you can go to, say, clip art and download a picture there to trace, just to make things a bit easier to get started. This is another design, again, a simple Christmas tree, but so easy to adapt and work with. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't forget we're putting a border around it as well, so there will be extra added details. We don't need to over clutter our initial design. Okay, so I've got my design printed. I've made sure that it fits inside my aperture. Okay, so just make sure that your design is going to fit inside your aperture before you begin. So the next stage then is to get our design onto the silk. Now again, I use these fading pens, so you'll see when I draw with it, it will come out really bright purple, but it will fade away over time. Those of you familiar with sort of sewing and quilting will have used these pens before. You could actually, for this card activity, do it in pencil because we're using a solid colour gutter and we're not going to be looking at the reverse of this design. So if you were to trace in pencil, if you haven't got one of these pens handy, then that would be absolutely fine. So I'm just going to place my silk over, and what you can see, hopefully you can see, but if I hold it up, the camera might take a bit of time to focus. There you go. You can see, because of the translucency of the silk material, the design shows through really clearly there. Okay. Now I do prefer to trace first because I find then when I apply the gutter, I can move the silk around and I'm less likely then to kind of smudge it. I'm a left-handed person and that's always been something that lefties are more prone to, is smudging. Right, so here we go. Tracing the simple outline shape. I'm not too much worried if the lines are a bit wobbly because I can actually just, I know this pen's going to disappear, so I can sort that shape out. There we go. And then my larger one down here. Now, I'm not going to put any pattern inside these ones for now, just because I'm just keeping an eye on time at the moment. We'll see how we go. So what I've got here is I'm going to use a silver outliner today. I can get rid of the image that I'm tracing now. I'm just going to start, I've got a piece of tissue here. What I want to do is get the gutter coming out. There we go. I can just find the point at which it's coming out, so I don't just then squeeze it and end up with a big blob before I get started. So here we go. Now, you can see as I'm applying it, you might see it's kind of sitting on the surface, a bit like icing a cake. And it kind of does that when we've got the paper backing. If I was working on a frame and I had the fabric stretched, it would absorb a bit more all the way through. Okay. The key is to keep the line continuous, because anywhere there's gaps, so where I'm joining my silk, my gutter line up here, look, I've got a joining area here. I've got to make sure that it joins together because I don't want the dye to leak out. I'm just coming around the side here now. The other thing is if I draw this line too thin, what can happen is that the ink can leak through. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Can you see how I'm moving the paper? Obviously I've gone for a circle, not the easiest thing to draw accurately. I'm not too worried about accuracy anyway, but I'm able to move the paper as I'm applying the glitter. There we go. All right, so I'll just have a check now, just have a look and just make sure that I haven't got any breaks, especially where the joins are. I've just got to draw the inside, haven't I, here, look, as well. Just come around there like that. And also I'll continue, do the other shapes. Now, it's a really good idea with the glitter to let it dry properly for 24 hours. Just to make sure that you don't get any leaking through. It can be dry on top and have formed like a crust, and then it cannot be dry underneath, and it just kind of can find its way through. So 24 hours, just let them dry at room temperature. Don't be tempted to try and do it on the hairdryer, because again, you might find you dry the top of the glitter, but not the underneath. Okay, so draw out your designs, put them to one side, and you can come back to those the next day. So here we go. You can see how my glitter now has dried out and it's much flatter. It's not sitting on the surface so much like I've piped or iced a cake. Okay. Right, so the first technique I'm going to show you is how we can use salt into the dye to create this lovely sort of crystallized effect here, and it sort of makes it look a bit sparkly. So I thought that worked really well with the sparkly bauble idea for Christmas. So I've got my water ready. The paintbrush I'm using is this Prado. It's a watercolour paintbrush, but it's got a beautiful tip on it, and that helps when we've got really detailed areas. So when we're using salt, it works much better if the surface is wet to start with. You get a much better effect from the salt. So I'm just going to put the water inside the baubles, like so, before I begin. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, I am going to start with this bauble here, and I'm going to pick up some of my pink dye. I'll just move it a bit closer so you can see. And I'm just going to dot around the shape, just drying off my paintbrush so that I don't contaminate my colours up here. These are my mixing areas. These areas I want to try and keep the colour clean. So I'm coming down here with my blue now, and of course what you'll start to see is where the colours start to merge and mix. I'll get the purple. So my red and my blue mixing give me this lovely purple. I'll put a little bit more in there. Make sure the surface is nice and wet, and before I've just dabbed to the other side of the fabric there because I was rushing a bit. Just got my eye on the time. Okay, I then get my salt, sprinkle my salt onto the surface whilst it's still wet. Don't let it dry out, so that's why I'm going to do just one bauble at a time. Okay, and that's all it takes. So I can leave that now. I'll just quickly do these ones. It doesn't take long at all, just to go through again. So put my yellow on, dry my brush off, going into the blue now, and the yellow and blue are going to give me green. And you can start to see how these colours are merging and blending, just the kind of range of colours that I am going to get just from using these primary colours. I'm getting a little bit of breakthrough there, which is unusual. Maybe my line went a little bit thin, so there you go, it can happen to the best of us. Okay. So just make sure that your line is nice and continuous and you don't have any breakthroughs. Right, there we go. A bit of red up there. You get some orange going. Brilliant. And then I'll put some salt in there. Okay, so that then I put to one side, let that dry. If you do get breakthrough like that, there's not an awful lot that we can do about it. I can sort of try and dab it and lift it out. I'm not sure why that's happened, considering how many that I've made, but there you go. So you can look, just dab with some clean water and your paintbrush, and you can lift it out. So what I could do with that one is I could actually just come back and put a background into it, couldn't I? And that would look really nice. Okay. So just put that one to side to dry, and then when it's dried and I shake the salt off it, you'll see I get these lovely patterns on the surface like that, like a kind of a shimmery bauble. Okay, the next design I was going to show you, oh sorry, I'll just move to this one. So on this design, you can see I've used a whole selection of really lovely shimmery baubles, you know, really going all out for the Christmas glitter on that one. This is the outline shapes. And what I'm going to do here is, rather than putting the water down first on the bauble, I'm just going to put the ink down first of all, and then I'll drop another ink into it. So this is it's still wet into wet, but I haven't wet the fabric first. And you'll see the colours look a bit more vibrant, but I still get some great blending going on. So this time I'm just using the tip of my brush and I'm just guiding where I want the ink to go so that it goes around my silver snowflakes here. And just by going, sort of just touching the fabric close to the gutter line, it finds its way, it kind of spreads into fabric. It's so satisfying. It just finds its way around the gutter. There we go. Let's put that around here. I'm just concentrating now, because I mean, I could actually, if I do touch the gutter, I could just get a wet tissue and wipe it off afterwards. But it's not difficult to control and to get the nice crisp application of the dye first time round. There we go. And whilst that is still damp, wash and dry my brush, and I'm just going to get some blue on my brush, and I'm just going to dot around, and again you can see how I've instantly got that blending of the colours, but it hasn't spread as much before because it wasn't so wet. There we go. Okay, so there's another way that we can use silk paints. I'm just looking at time. I'm just going to put that one to one side, and I am going to find my final design that I got ready, which was this black outline design. Quite a different consistency, this glitter, to the other ones. It dries very flat and it comes out more runny. So what I did actually, just a little tip, when I bought the tube, it didn't have this metal nib on. I bought it from the same place I bought everything else. And I screwed this metal nib onto the end of the plastic tube, and it gave me a much finer nozzle. So just a little tip for you if you have found you've used silk before and you've had a problem with that ink running out too quickly. Okay. What I thought I'll just show you here, just those of you who are new to silk painting or just new to painting generally, just the versatility of just starting with 3 colours. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to put the blue down, first of all. Again, this time just dropping the ink in between the lines and letting the ink disperse inside shape there. Clean my brush, and I'm just going to take a bit of blue into my palette here, my mixing area, wash my brush off, pick up a bit of yellow into there. Okay, and obviously instantly I've got green, blue and yellow making green, but I can control the darkness or brightness of that green by adding more or less blue or yellow, and I just want that to be a little bit brighter, so I just added a bit of yellow to that. And now I'm going to take that in to here. So just to save you a bit of cost really, just spend a bit of time. Doesn't take a lot of time, you just saw actually. Just familiarise yourself with those sort of basic colour mixing combinations. I'm just going to go yellow actually up here with each of these. There we go. Often they're kind of a shiny metal clasp that holds the top on. So round here, I'm just going to go my yellow background. Now, with all of the designs that I've demonstrated so far, I haven't done a background. I've left the background white. There's nothing to stop you painting the background as well if you wish. One of my backgrounds for this design actually, I did the light blue background and I sprinkled salt into the background. And I thought it kind of looked a bit like snowflakes, sort of crystals in the background. There we go, I'll just finish this one off here. And then I'm going to mix orange. Now you can see how this certainly worked much better than the last one. So I don't know why that happened. But here you can see very clearly it's holding the dye in the areas that we want it to stay in. Right, I'm now going to put some yellow over here. As you do, I'm going to change my water pots over because I can just see it's starting to taint the colour a little bit. So I'm just going to get some clean water. A little bit of pink in there. That's quite a pinky orange. I'm just going to add a little bit more yellow to that just to increase the lightness of the orange. And there we go. Literally just put a drop in the middle of the star shape and it's just spread. See how quickly that is to do. That runs in so quickly. And then finally up here, let's just look at purple. Mixing, so I'm going to put some blue in. Alternate areas of blue, so I haven't got the same colour next to each other. You know, if you want to use sort of brown earthy colours, then you just mix all of your primary colours together. So a bit of blue. It's my red. I'm using a very pinky red here, just because I know that by having that as my primary red colour, I get these more vibrant colours as I mix them. So again, another tip for you, if you like working with the bright colours, perhaps rather than going for cadmium red to start with, you could start with something like, they call this a raspberry red. There we go. And I'll come in there and you can see how bright that purple is. Right, so those are the three different processes. We've looked at using salt on the dye to create crystallised effect. We've looked at dropping one colour dye into another dye, so we still get that mixing on the surface, more vibrant colours. And then finally, I've just shown you using block colours, but how versatile primary colours are, and sort of some of the range of colours that you could mix. Okay, so when you've done your three designs and they've dried, we need to present them. Now, when I'm doing silk dyes or garments, I'll always heat fix the garment to keep the dye permanent. Now with a card, it's not so essential. You can put a piece of cotton again over the top of it, like a tea towel or a sheet, and heat fix it, whatever the jar says on it. The instructions are very clear on the packaging. Or actually with cards, I can heat fix with a hairdryer. If I just have a hot hairdryer over for long enough, then the dye will stay and it will just keep the colours vibrant over a period of time so you don't get any fading. So the second part of the activity then was to think about presenting. Now, if I was to take one of my designs, just as it is, especially the ones about the background, and put it in my card, it's going to look lost a little bit with all of that white around it. So one of the easiest things to do, which just really lifts the presentation straight away, is just to put some borders in, and then you can add to your design. I mean, there's so much you can do with aperture cards. We could really just spend, you know, several weeks on just having fun with decorating the aperture cards. But I'm just going to give you some just basic ideas just to get started. So in my pencil case over here, I have a load of Sharpie pens. I've also got Posca pens over there and some watercolour pens, but I just want to go for the permanent at the moment, nice and vibrant, and they're not going to run, anything like that. So starting with this one over here, nice multicoloured design, so it'd be nice to put some multicoloured borders in that kind of emphasise and bring out the colours that are in the design. So with a clear ruler so that I can see where I'm putting the line, I'm just going to draw, I'm just going to put a piece of paper underneath here, so it doesn't go through onto the surface. Okay. So holding up to the edge, I'm just going to go round and create this border edge. And even if I do nothing else, this is going to lift the design and just make it stand out, because remember I've got quite a lot of white background in my design. Just to finish off around here, and I'll just show you what a difference that makes. There we go. So just by doing that purple edge, there we go, and already that just really finishes that design off and puts a nice emphasis around the design. Now, obviously, I've got these larger ones than I had for my demonstration cards, because I felt my lettering was a little bit squished around here. So by having the bigger space up and down here, I can just do a little bit more of my message, my greeting message. You might even have some of the stickers with the words on that you could use if you don't trust your hand writing. Well, it's just nice to put the sparkly stickers on. I haven't been to the range, obviously, for a while, but they're always good for things like that. So I can continue doing the outline around this one, and that could be enough for that design. Now, the other thing I tend to do, because I'll be using other colours with the same ruler, just a little tip for you, is to have a tissue nearby, just to wipe off the edge of your ruler, so that you don't end up putting your ruler down on the page and then putting a colour down, smudging the colour somewhere where you don't want it. So just cleaning off my ruler. Okay, now other things I can add to this design. I've got over here some little jewels like so, and a bit of PVA glue into my palette here. You can see the time, so I'm just kind of hurrying on a little bit now. Got a bamboo stick here, and I can just dot down the side and then just apply some of these little sparkles, just dropping them into the glue that I've put down. Okay. And just add a touch of glitter. You don't have to do too much to embellish that aperture, but just adding something really does give it a lovely professional finish. And it makes the card into a present in its own right, really. It makes it really special for somebody to receive, which would be lovely in these strange times, you know, to think of somebody, a neighbour or a friend or a relative you can't get to see. Let's make a really special gift for them. To give you some other ideas then, before I finish off here, you can see this has got the borders on. I've done some multicoloured borders here. I've put another colour inside another, and I've got the star shapes around it. Again here, just two colours of borders. I went silver and pink, and then just got a little bit of ribbon. I didn't buy stuff, I just sort of went through my cupboards and thought, what have I got that I could use? And I just tied a little ribbon. I can cut the corners out of that and make a pretty shape out of that. Okay. Then the other thing that I've recently discovered, this was my lockdown treat to myself, as I bought myself a palette of shimmery paints. Now I got these from Holcraft, but they keep popping up at the moment on Facebook, these different kinds of metallic watercolours. And these ones, I was surprised. I thought they looked a bit stingy with the amount of painting, but I've used them loads already. Lovely creamy consistency, and you get a really lovely solid, I don't know if you can quite appreciate the shimmer, maybe just there. And that's a lovely background then to start working into, and you can see where I've gone over the top with the Sharpie pens, and the paint hasn't lifted at all, it hasn't smudged, it's gone really well over the top. And I used a Posca pen here just to draw some extra sort of frilly detail over the top. So I did my borders with my gold Sharpie, then my pink Sharpie, and then put the lettering on, sparkles in the corner, and went in with my Posca pen. Right, I've given you lots of ideas just to get started. So an introduction into silk painting, just some ideas on presentation, and that really is my time done for today. So I really hope you've enjoyed this activity, and I really hope also I get to see some of your creations, some of the things that you've come up with. So thank you again for joining me, and thank you to Rugby Museum and Art Gallery, and have a lovely Christmas, everyone. Bye-bye.